job probably and possibly for the right reasons, but they're getting set up to fail.
You need smaller units, manageable, because these big warehouses, they're no good.
Lions being commanded by lambs, isn't it? And that's what you're getting. Like politicians going, I think it should be this, I think it should be this, but there's no money to do anything. And if anything goes wrong, it's your fault.
The prison system is failing people. We're putting them in, stewing behind a door.
Everything's just thrown in a box, and everyone's like running around scratching their heads, wondering why it's not working.
You're coming into a broken system, you're being released from a broken system. I feel despondent even talking about it.
I've made many years in the service, and you work with people, and you make some good friends. You make some good friends. 90% as colleagues. And you have some fallouts, you have whatever, but them fallouts are left at the gate. You walk in. We used to walk in united. Whether we got on with the guy but you were always there. Now you sometimes I've seen it, and in these reports, and it's thankfully it's not massive, it's not widespread, but it can happen. And you're right. So prisoners are looking for things. Let's face it, especially with no activities, they've got, they're looking into what always amazed me, some of the things that prisoners made and invented and how they got round various things. I worked in the times of the no electric, no and all of that. It was from an electrician, it was genius, some of the stuff that was getting produced. So they've got time, so they look at that and they look and they'll maybe circle around an officer who's maybe they've picked up that nobody really likes from even the officer side, and they'll talk and befriend and start, that officer will maybe elevate towards that, and that's how the first stages of corruption will start. Coercion will start, because you're just looking for to get through your day, basically.
If you're criminal and you've got half a brain, you tend to be Machiavellian by nature, don't you? Yeah. And you tend to exploit by nature. There's a compulsion to exploit. And you have got all day, every day, to find out where the chink in the armour is, isn't it? And there's another huge danger. Absolutely. So yeah.
I mean, we've done it. I remember walking around Franklin with you, Phil, and you've walked on a wing, and there's 3 staff sitting upstairs around a desk, and there's one on their own down there. How does that look?
Yeah.
If I was going to get stuck into someone, you're going to target them, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. But like you say, there was unity, and even within, when I was in Acklington, I got on with prison. Even if you're being Machiavellian, it's about playing the game, isn't it? Yeah. And prison officers want the best day at work they can get and the easiest ride they can get, and run the system and keep it right. And I think anybody sensible wants to do the same on the other side as a servant, as a prisoner. You just want to get what you get out of the system, do the best you can, and get out as quickly as you can, even if your intention is to break the law when you get out.
Yeah.
So it's just a powder keg, isn't it, hearing all this? And I think, I think we're a little bit shocked ourselves.
Yeah, no, I'm sort of interested in the psychology part of it, and it's the games that people play. It's wrote about how prisoners that risk taken and things like that. But it is a game of getting your release if you're still fully intended in getting up to no good. But then sitting here today, listening to you two guys, realising that dynamic's going on between staff as well, and there's a disconnect. It's shocking.
It's coming from, and this is not down to the staff that's coming in. We've had some fantastic, we've got some great staff across across all of the prison service. What this is down to. This is down to HMPPS setting prison officers up to fail. Mm-hmm. Employing prison officers, reducing the training down to 6 to 8 weeks now, and sending them back into an environment not prepared.
Yeah.
They're not prepared for it, and it's the people are joining the job probably and possibly for the right reasons, but they're getting set up to fail, as much as we've already discussed how unfortunately prisoners are getting set up to fail by, the lack of work that's going on within prisons for them.
Hearing this as well, I mean, what chance have you got if you're sent onto the job? Because even if you've had 8 weeks training, if there was an opportunity to kind of shadow and there was lots of funding going in and the regime was running as it should, you might get an opportunity to kind of learn on the job, if you like, which is not ideal. But if you're not even getting that because of a lack of funding and the regime isn't working, what chance have you got?
Well, when I joined the job, we did a week at the establishment. You did your tours, all your talks, got your uniform. We were sent to a prison service college at Wakefield for a 4-week block. You go in there, you put into sections, loads of staff from different jails, and it was a proper regime. You were getting first thing on the morning, you were having your breakfast, you were either marching around the car park doing drill, or you're in the gym doing circuits or cross country. Back in uniform, you were doing all your practical stuff, your searching, your cuffing, the paperwork side of it. Then you'd be back out, another gym session, you're controlling restraint. It was structured. You went back to your establishment for a week, familiarised yourself with the establishment again, and you were back to the college for another 4 weeks. I come out of that and I thought, actually, I'm part of something here.
Yeah.
I felt part of a team. You bonded with the staff you were with. You felt prepared. Nothing's ever going to prepare you. You learn 90% of the job on the job. But I was surrounded by good, experienced staff who wanted to help us. Like now, a lot of the training's done in-house. There's no colleges. Staff are sent away. They're stopping in hotels. Probably sat on their own in a hotel room. They're trained by possibly less experienced staff. You're not setting them up right. The foundations aren't there.
Yeah.
I transferred down to Franklin 230. I had 23 years in the job when I transferred down. And it's a massive, massive jump from or it was to me, it was an eye-opener going from a Category C to a high security jail. I was assigned a member of staff, and I spoke to this member of staff and, his first introduction was, where'd you do your training and what you're doing? I says, I've transferred in. He said, how long you got? Blah. I've had 23 years of job. He said, well, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing mentoring you? I've only got 10 years of job. I says, because I've no idea about high security. I says, you just point me in the right direction. You tell me what I need to be doing and where I'm going wrong or right in high security. And it was that. I had no issues at all. And I got a great, even that, although I was on straight onto the job, but I did have somebody looking over my shoulder, just saying, this is how we do it in high security. And, that's, the people coming direct into high security, that never used to happen. We're now getting staff in high security jails who were 18-year-old. You weren't allowed to work in high security unless you were 21 many years ago. Yeah. And they're coming direct from training to be thrown in to possibly have to, deal with, high ranking OCG members who can be, A, for some people, very, very intimidating.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And B, to be fair, to a certain extent, like celebrities. We've all seen, especially with your Netflixes and everything, we've all seen the documentaries, and a lot of OCGs have wrote books and everything.
Some of the prisoners that I was just about to say, some of the prisoners that you mentioned before, when I was in that life, I'd read all their books and stuff. That was what you did when you were in that life, when you were away. So I've read their books. So there is a certain celebrity attached to them, absolutely.
Yeah, and modern life, in it, certain element of outside just adores celebrity, the celebrity culture.
Well, Andy Warhol said we'll all be famous for 15 minutes, didn't he? I don't know if he was right, So, yeah.
I just wanted to go back to that, them words, setting someone up to fail. Together, collectively, around the table, we can all see that for what it is and acknowledge it as it's right. But further up the policy making decision makers, who the implementation of new legislation or whatever, I've currently come off a allocations meeting this morning. We've got all in the northeast prisons, where we pick people up to support them in the community with housing, drug support, mental health support, doctor referral schemes, etc. ad infinitum. However, we've picked 8 up this morning that unknown releases So the care navigators that we've got in all the North East prisons, bar and Frankland, not many people get released from Frankland, as you'll appreciate. Yeah. They haven't been able to do any sort of screening of what their needs are to pass on to us guys who work in the community. So we're sort of like, I feel set up to fail by trying to find someone who you don't know who his probation officer is, you don't know what area they're being released to. What chance have I got of giving them the support that they need that I've got access to? If I feel like that, how do they feel? So it is being set up to fail, and like every man and his dog, Gary, have been told, "Oh, you're out early, you're out tomorrow." You jump at it, but the reality is that's got to have a knock-on effect. It's all right if you've got family support, money in the bank, a job to go to, protective factors wrapped around you. But if you're being released homeless,
well, that's why I said
bonkers.
The housing company I've got with my business partner, we set that up, as a reaction to working in the prisons, because people were saying, well, as they do, it's all right for you. I get out and I've got nowhere to live and stuff. So originally I was referring people into other organisations. Then I thought, well, we might be able to do it better. But the amount of people we get just self-referring or coming to our door, and they just haven't been given any help. And I've talked to officers as I've been doing a lot of this prison work as well, and they feel despondent about not being able to provide it. Yet when I was in jail, I used to think, well, he doesn't even want to help me. Why would he? And then you do meet some decent officers and you get a rapport and you get a bond, I guess. You do get it. And you realise that they're not all bad and some of them do want to help you. So the frustrations are many and splendid, aren't they, right round the table?
Yeah, and it's, for you doing that, there's potential catastrophic implications on it, because, God forbid something serious happens that, without the right information or whatever, that you can't do right for that person coming out. A, you've been set up to fail. B, he's been set up to fail. And ultimately, it could be catastrophic that the general public's been set up to fail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about I had a plethora of offending behaviour programs that I could do. A lot of it was CBT, and really developed my understanding and knowledge. But something that we had back in the 80s and the early 90s was, before you got out, you had a pre-release course to go and do with officers, education. NACRO would be there saying that we can provide that. Where's that gone? Who pulled the funding on that? Where's the officers got time to be part of that? There isn't, is there, at the moment?
No, we're just turnkeys. At the end of the day, we've gone back to being just turnkeys,
Yeah, the funding was gone, and it's frustrating. We can go back maybe even 20 years for the lack of investment in the prison service. It became from governments, let's be tough on crime. And I believe they thought tough on crime just meant locking people up. Well, that's not tough on crime. That's just making crime wait for a few years to start again. Because as soon as you're out with no hope, no course, like you say, interesting. You mentioned, the pre-release course was a great course. Staff, and again, it was another string to our bow to get us staff to get to know. People that were locking up, and you get that rapport. It's all about you walk around, and as I say, you'll know yourself. You walk around jails now. There's some great examples in some jails where you'll go in and you can see, the prisoner staff relationship's pretty good. But you mentioned off camera about your heightened. Hypervigilance. We'll go into some of we'll walk into some of the jails and go, oh dear me,
powder keg.
I'm not, as an experienced officer, I'm even thinking I'm not so keen walking around here.
I've had that since I started my new role. I've been going into places thinking, I didn't fancy this.
Yeah.
But
I think if you're looking at it, if there can be no kind of therapeutic intervention to someone serving a sentence, or no skills learned, if you are hell bent on breaking the law, you've just had a lack of opportunity or trauma or whatever the reasons are that you're breaking the law, or criminal greed. If there's not another way, though, like you've quite rightly said, all you've got's the revolving door of getting out and coming back in. I often say when I'm doing the work, I know 10,000 criminals, if not more. I know 3 who've never been to prison, who are multimillionaires and they all live abroad. The other ones are just like me. They're coming back to jail because eventually you're getting caught and you're coming back in. Yeah. You're coming into a broken system. You're being released from a broken system. I feel despondent even talking about it.
I mean, I've just had my first experience of open jails, Cat D's. Never been in one in my life. Got this new role. I've got 3 in my area. Visiting one of them, wow. So you walk in and all the staff's telling us when you can spot a member of staff because there isn't any. It's just that these lads aren't ready for this yet. They're not ready for it. There's not the work. There's not the resettlement pathways to get them out to live decent lives and going back again, setting them up to fail.
When I went into Kirklevington, I mean, when I first got to Kirklevington, I didn't like it because I'd come straight from Acklington, walking around in my pyjamas, and sent to home house for a couple of days, which I hated. Then I ended up in Kirklev, but there was a lot of freedom to be presented with after 3-4 years being in jail. But the amount of stuff there you could do, it was all there. Now you ended up working in the wood at the side of the prison. Then I got a job for Poland Day in a charity and stuff. So even me, after really relatively just a few years away, there was that transition back into the community. It was actually there for you. And the amount of stuff you could do within Kirklev at the time was crazy. The opportunity was massive.
Yeah.
So yeah, man.
I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, I think maybe 50% of the lads will go out to work, do the night shifts, but the staff just keep telling me these lads, some of them aren't ready. They're not ready. They're too early in the sentence.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's been extended, hasn't it? I think when I got to Kirklev, you could only get there with 2 years left. Yeah. And I'm using Kirklev as an example because I was in there. But I think that's been extended now to more years.
Yeah,
where you can go.
It went up to 3, and now it's 5.
Yeah,
so,
but it's just population pressure, isn't it? Phrase used, they've turned into Cat C open prisons rather than a Cat D open prison full of Cat C prisoners.
Talking about the categories of prison there and setting people up to fail and then people not being ready for release. As you say, I've sort of found myself questioning the morality of what I'm witnessing. That if you've got people who are suffering from addiction and that their antecedents show that acquisitive crimes have paid for their illicit drug use on the street, you're putting them on a wing, and there's say 30 of these individuals on a wing of 60, but you've also on that wing got OSG group members, people serving sentences for drug importation and etc. You've actually given them same people the opportunity to carry on what they were successfully doing, well, almost successfully, trying to do and implement on the outside, on the inside, because they've got 30 people that actively want what they can provide, and it's sort of not encouraging them to get out of the game, it's almost encouraging them to stay in the game. And those that maybe want to get drug support, drug help, drug intervention, can't, because you've got someone tapping you on your shoulder saying, "Oh, got a bit of this if you want it." You can have it on bail. How can the two cohorts be in the same room, in the same building? It doesn't add up to my type of Socratic questioning.
So on the one hand, you're almost enabling it, and you're not breaking the cycle, and you're not.
No.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Curious Matter Productions, turning up the volume on society's forgotten voices. The series Hope in Hell is a platform for amplifying raw, real stories of survival, despair and triumph, told through open, honest and powerful conversations, because no matter what life throws at you, there's always hope.
My personal view is you need smaller units, manageable, because these big warehouses, they're no good. I was at Berwyn a couple of weeks ago, brand spanking new jail, fantastic facilities. You walked on a wing, someone said, this wing holds 700 people. They've all, they're blocked off into little things, but 700 people. You know,
that's like that's literally a prison on
it's a warehouse. It's a warehouse.
Yeah.
You need small units, manageable, well staffed, and I think the lads who want to conform, follow the regime, will sort of drift. You know, if you don't want to comply, if you don't want to follow the regime, we'll house you somewhere else. You know, and hopefully nature will dictate that. Everyone wants a nice, comfortable life. Like, get that right, get them safe, get them secure first, then start investing, doing things, training people.
So when you touch on safety, then coming back around to where we were, so what if Rodney and I are sitting here now, we've got the answers, we've got the magic wand. What are the answers to this? Because we've touched upon a lot of kind of, you know, realistic negativity, really. So we're looking at a broken system. We're looking at, you know, undertrained staff. You know, you're overexposed. The risk levels are through the roof. The frustration's boiling over on both sides. What would be the answer? If we had the checkbook there now, what are the answers to this?
I think the answers are that we, you know, first and foremost is money. You know, let's face it, we all need to live. Is that there's been an erosion over the last 15 years of prison officers' wages. You know, when I joined the job, even well before that, we were comparable with what the police were on. We're now about 15,000, if not more. You know, even if prison officers over the fair and sustainable era had got just inflation pay rises, we got below inflation rises on a regular basis. Even if we'd got inflation pay rises, would have been on another £13,000 to what we are on now.
12 grand down, haven't we?
You know, I showed many years ago, I showed an MP, you know, my wage, you know, by the fact is that obviously there was an attack on the pensions. We had to start, I was a non-contributor to my pensions when I first joined, which is one of the things that attracted us, to be fair. They then eroded that and took it off and then had to contribute. So I showed my local MP at the time my take-home pay from 2010, and I also showed my take-home pay from 2017, and my take-home pay had gone up £4.
Yeah.
In 7 to 8 years. So ultimately, paying the right wages. Obviously, many years ago, they had accommodation. So you've got a lot of places down in my area that, you know, staff can't afford to live. I mean, a prime example, they've just opened Millsite, which is next to Full Sutton in York.
Yeah, York, yeah.
You tell me a prison officer can afford a house around there, you know.
Yeah.
It's just ludicrous. So ultimately, that side of it, from our side, it's an investment in that. From the prison services side, it's an investment in the whole infrastructure to make things better. You know, we talk about workshops. We had a brick workshop. We've got upholstery workshops. But the staff who were working in there, the brick workshop was shut. In the upholstery, they're not doing the upholstery they should be doing because they're not trained upholsterers, because the trained upholsterer isn't coming into the prison service. You know, down south, there's no instructors coming in to the decent shops, you know, the bike shops, the things like that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to work
excuse me,
for HMPBS because they can go and get far more money doing the trade outside. You know, we've talked, you know, there is a lack of trades across, you know, the country, you know, just that. So why would you, you know, drop your wage 10,000 to potentially work in an environment that's violent? So the big magic wand is investment. Is somebody spend somebody. You know, we go on about overcrowding. There's loads. There's thousands of prison spaces. They're just derelict. They're just being wrecked. There's no investment into these to open these. You know, there's lots of prisons with wings not open because of the lack of investment. You know, roofs coming down, ceilings leaking, pipe work gone. Yeah. It's there's been zero investment.
So they're not fit for purpose.
They're not fit for purpose. Yeah. So, you know, if the magic wand came and they were all fixed tomorrow, then that would alleviate a huge amount of the population crisis.
And what's your thoughts on? So if you look at this, it's a huge public safety issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got people within the jail. There's all these early, you know, mistaken releases. You've got the broken system. There's wings that are not working. Why is to your mind, why is this investment not forthcoming? because it's a huge political issue as well, isn't it?
It's just not a vote winner. Simple. It's not a vote winner.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I think the public would resent the investment. The public want to be protected and they want to be kept safe. I don't think they want to pay for it. Like,
Yeah,
it's not a vote winner for.
But yeah, if you talk to people in general, and I've talked to a lot about the prisons and work in prisons and stuff, people in general want that system. The ones who I've talked to want that system to work, because why wouldn't they? Yeah. Because ultimately, if it does work, you're stopping one more victim in the community. I don't think we're talking about. I hope we're not talking about creating holiday camps, which is another favourite by the newspapers. It's a holiday camp, but we are talking about investment to fix this system for a multitude of reasons. They're all positive to my mind. I don't know what you think, Rodney.
Yes, it is. It's a lack of investment and a lack of focused investment as well. I think there's investment in some wrong places. It almost seems like people are putting square pegs in round holes. Just two prisons that come to mind. On the south coast, HMP North Eye, which hasn't been here for about 30 years. A prison I served my CCAT in on my life sentence was HMP Blunderston, shut down, but sold for housing. Lowestoft and West Sussex to affluent areas where, like, the money that was brought in off them estates being closed down, where was that commandeered? Where did that go? Was that not reinvested back into building the new mill sites or other places? I doubt it probably was. There's no one sat at the table, unfortunately, that can answer that, but yeah, it just needs.
Yeah, unfortunately, the vast majority of the new prisons come online are privately owned, privately managed. These big companies are making absolute fortunes out of it. My personal belief, it should be the state. Look, builds them, maintains them, runs them, and manages them.
Yeah.
Why should a big multinational firm come in and cream away millions of profits? Because the big saving you'll ever get in any industry is staff, isn't it?
Of course.
Yeah. They'll be run on minimum staff.
Yeah. Because they do tend to come in, don't they, and do what any business would do, cut it, and have it running literally on a shoestring, which is bad for business as well.
Yeah. Your staff's your biggest asset in a jail.
Yeah. You've
got plenty well-trained staff. The place will tick over nicely.
Yeah, we know the private prisons fail. Loudon Grange, prime example. It's just been taken back into the public sector. Loudon Grange, Nottingham. So that's just been taken back in the public sector. But equally in public sector, as much as the public sector prison, a vast amount of the public sector prison is privatised. The works department is privatised. Another prime example, you'll remember your works department. You had a prisoner with you, so you were teaching them through a little bit of works and stuff like that. Yeah. That's all gone. It's owned by private companies who, I'm going back, charging astronomical, £2,000 to move an office. To move the furniture, astronomical. They're sucking any money out of the service, and that's what private companies do. They're there to suck the money out, and when it's not there, they hand it back. There you go. Yeah, we failed, so you can have it back now.
Yeah.
And on the subject of training staff and recruitment, if the money was there and you had your way today, how would you go about doing that? Because I'm interested in it.
Well, the recruitment's a massive problem. We've got lots and lots of staff who are wanting to come in. We've got a lot of probably experienced, life-skilled people that are coming in. But there's the actual big problems within the prison services, the vetting system and everything. Again, my daughter's a prime example. She left the service 4 and a bit year ago, and she came back as what you would call a fast-track returner. So they basically look for experienced staff to come back. So as a fast-track returner, last June she was told she had a job back at HMP Franklin. She started on the 1st of March. It was 9 months as a fast-track returner. Mm-hmm. So that's how long it took her to get through the process. So a lot of people, and you'll see it online, who are experienced people have been trying to get at the prison service. One of my prisons I was in last week, they're very, very short of the operational support grades, and they're telling me it's taken over a year for these to be vetted. So there's that system. And then, like I said, so by the time they've got round to it, who can wait potentially a year for a job? You just go to look for something else. And once you're in a job, you're in a job, isn't it? So we're not getting we're not getting people through the door fast enough. And then when they get there, as I say, that we've already talked about, the training's been vastly reduced. You know, down to you're literally doing a lot of online stuff, and it's just get you through.
I think a face-to-face interview would help as well.
Well, yes.
You know?
Yeah. I just
we don't have a
found that out as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think now it's done online.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have a face-to-face interview at the time, but I went to a job simulation assessment centre. So I was took to Durham Prison. You went into a house, the old quarters. You went up in pairs. You walked into a room and you were greeted with a scenario.
Yes.
It was generally an angry fella kicking off at you.
Yeah.
Things like that. Now it's just done online. I don't think we attract people for a second career. You know, a lot of people coming in now, it's their first ever jobs. Years ago, it was almost sometimes like a second career. Like people like Phil, ex-tradesmen, ex-forces. You know, life experience, work ethic. Get that balance right. Yeah, bring young stuff in from college, university, whatever. But you've got to blend that with a bit of life experience as well. Like,
yeah, I concur to that. I think we had that slight discussion off camera where I came across a governor in HMP Garth who'd served 25 years in the Navy.
Yeah.
And that he now wouldn't apply for the role in the prison service because, one, it wouldn't be financially viable. I'm sure that they took the getting 25-year pension into government services like the Navy and the HMPPS has been removed. I'm not 100% certain on that, but how he dealt with a high-intensity Category B training prison was just like, I smile at how he interacted with those guys who were trying to rock the boat. You couldn't get that with someone who's fresh.
Yeah.
And that's been lost, I feel.
Well, there is pockets of hope, isn't there? Because I think during the conversation we had before we started this, and during while we've been talking as well, I know it's very difficult, but there is still some amazing staff and some amazing work taking place underneath very difficult circumstances. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, yeah. There's the staff try to do that. You know, we as both local unions and now national unions, you know, don't want to be sort of not being arrogant or whatever, but we are the people who do have the answers.
Yeah.
We have the answers. If they will just sit down and start to listen to us, and we've had success as a union on a lot of things. You know, we have had some significant, pay rises for that divide in staff. You know, so the 10-year plan was concluded a lot quicker than 10 years. It was about 7 years when eventually they collapsed and realised it was critical. But we've still got, things to push. You know, you look at pay increase. You know, we've just had is it 3.5%, and then you see the pay, the so-called pay review bodies, independent for us as payment, saying that MPs deserve 6.5 because of the violence that they're subject to. You know, come on, we've looked at over 10,000 assaults on staff last year, over 1,000 serious. 90 assaults in prisons a day, 30,
I think 30 staff assaults a day,
assaults a day across the state, and we have to read that in the press, about people's, and I'm not trying to say, we deserve more than the NHS and so on and so on and so on, but we need to get that, we need to get,
I think being treated fairly and with respect would be a good start.
Okay. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we are. It's always been well known that unfortunately the prison service are never mentioned as an emergency service. We're not mentioned in the same vein as the police, the ambulance. COVID was a big. It'll show you that. We worked. Tightly. We were asked to step up to the plate. We worked in many staff. Within jails. Worked 30 days on and 1 day off, then 30 days on, 1 day is off. We weren't, and I'm not, I wasn't a great fan of going to the front of the queues and all that, but we weren't afforded that. We were doing 30 days and going to the supermarket and standing in a 3-hour queue and then going back to work 8 hours later, you know. And I'm not for sympathy on that.
I think
you know?
one of the things for me as well in relation to COVID, I saw a prison up when nobody really knew what COVID was, and obviously it was a forest fire in the prisons, wasn't it, in such a contained environment. And I think one of the things for me, I thought, you know, it's brave that they were turning up to go to work, because nobody was really sure what it was. No. And you saw all these pictures of people dying in hospitals, and you know these, you know, Nightingale hospitals were going up. It's showing your body bags at the back of hospitals, and prison officers as were, you know, NHS and other emergency service, but still turning up and going to work.
The interesting thing with COVID is violence was down.
Yeah.
Self-harm, not disappeared, well down, wasn't it?
Yeah, well down, yeah.
We didn't learn anything from it. It was almost a rush to get back to where we were, you know.
You know, we've gone to pre-pandemic, you know, we've had an increase in violence across the estate at 29 to 30% now, and that's because, you know, we had settled cohorts, and you've got to remember a lot. You know, even in the interesting thing about COVID was we got some kickback off prisoners, obviously, because their thing was, you've brought it into us. We wouldn't get this. We couldn't get this if you hadn't brought it in.
Which is ridiculous.
So but you know, you get a bit of a kickback. But we had smaller cohorts and
did they forget about visits and stuff?
Well,
they must have done. Yeah.
So when you know, a lot of things why violence was down, whatever, you know, things like canteen that prisoners got. We had a lot of prisoners saying, you know, I'm happy behind my door. I'm happy only getting out with 12 of us because I'm comfortable with them 12. Them probably, you know, what you call is the prisoners who didn't have any big connection, didn't have whatever. They were saying, well, I'm getting my canteen on a Thursday and I've still got it on a Sunday. Because, you know, when you're on some of the wings, you know yourself, you know, people will just walk around and say, I'm having that. Thanks.
Bullying's rife, yeah.
Yeah, so bullying fell, self-harm fell, you know. Again, probably interaction with staff was up because, again, you were working with
your lifeline than ever, isn't it?
Yeah, you were working with your cohort.
Mm-hmm.
As an organisation, if that's the right word for it, the POA, and as members of that, listening to the narrative today, as I have, it's all right getting that message out, and like, you know, the drum's being beaten of what hope can be instilled, how can it be improved, what can be done better, but like you can't have that narrative if somewhere someone's got the fingers in their ears and they aren't listening. What gives the message validation, and where does that need to radiate to?
I think what the service needs to do is acknowledge we've got a very young, raw staff group at the minute. If you can keep hold of them, develop them, build that experience up, 5-10 years time, all them staff who've got now 1-2 years in, they're going to be experienced.
Yeah.
Build them, develop them, and then just look at the statistics.
Well, there's another
violence. You know, that's what we're measured against, violence.
Results prove it. And one of my prisons, HMP Wentwood Scrubs, hasn't returned to pre-COVID regimes. They've changed and evolved slowly, but not to the full extent of it, and their violence is down.
Yeah.
It's proven that these systems work. You know, you've got to look at potentially places like HMP Belmarsh, you've got, I think, 133 recognised gangs. You know, if you're unlocking a lot of prisoners, it's natural. You're going to have about 6 or 7 gangs that, you know, ultimately just want to kill the guy next door to him just because he lived 3 streets away.
Well,
you know?
I mean, what you've got as well, you've got issues and problems that have occurred on the street. Obviously, going behind the wall, you're duty bound if you're in a gang to attack anyway.
Yeah.
That's how it is, isn't it? So it might not have been you and me that had the problem. It could have been these two, but we're part of a different gang, and then you're off. So I think you're absolutely right. But that comes back to what you were saying, smaller units.
Yeah.
You know, dealing with it that
and
like
to a point, I think that service needs to disrupt as well. Needs to disrupt these OCGs, these street gangs. Disrupt them. Use the intelligence. Move them around. Use the prison estate. You know, it's just keeping prisoners safe and staff safe as well, isn't it?
like you say, the smaller units, and they have, over the last few years have gone in, obviously, separation centres opened in 2017, and that was to look at extremists, and I'm not just talking Muslim extremists, I'm talking their far right extremists, animal rights extremists, any extreme organisations. Now, it only ever got to a maximum of 3 in the country. There's other things that destabilise. We all know the crisis in the mental health system. There's not enough people getting the help they need. We've got mentally ill people in prisons. We've got people that are suffering from Asperger's, things like that. There's not the right places for these people, and when you've got that disruption potentially, all your resources is going into a small area. The rest of the regime fails. When you've got somebody constantly doing that and disrupting, probably because they've got mental health issues for one, or something else that they shouldn't be on that wing, but you can't unlock the rest of the regime whilst you're trying to deal with somebody who it can only be unlocked before staff. Well, the rest of it, so again, we go back to frustration.
You've just took any equity of you giving me any time, because your time stuck up by him away. So
I think each jail could probably have 1 or 2 units of just select. If you let the staff select prisoners who just want to get their heads down, be compliant, follow the regime, I think that's the way forward, because they're the lads who suffer.
Yeah, of course.
Death in custody is an all-time high. We're now at a point where, I don't know, is it corporal punishment by default? You know what I mean? That's it. Again, we're failing people. The prison system is failing people. We're putting them in, they're stewing behind the door. They're having too long to stew behind the door, and ultimately, they take the biggest sacrifice. Yeah. As it sits at the minute, you've kind of got to decide who you want to fail. Yeah. Do you want to fail that cohort because I haven't got time, or do you want, just exactly what you've just said there? Who do we concentrate on when we should be concentrating on them all, but separately? You've got to be taken out. It's very difficult to come off drugs and try and get drug free and help yourself. If you're stuck behind the door and somebody's whispering through your door saying, "Look, you'll get through the next 3 days banged up if you just take a couple of these," So,
it's also separating. If I'm looking to sell food, sorry to use the name for drugs that the youth are using at the moment, but Gary is as well. And we're on the same wing, but there's no one who's wanting our product. I can't go to Gary and say, "You look after my stuff and keep it in the bank, and I'll give you a £5 a week canteen." He's going to tell me to fuck off. So the me needing what I've got, I'm probably not going to have it, because where am I going to distribute it? It's like putting the two in the same house again. I know I mentioned it earlier, and we've sort of half off camera now, but it just doesn't add up. And like you said, officers with autism, Asperger's, mental health training, not to clinical standards, working with individuals who are disrupting and finding what their needs are and delivering something that fulfills their day in a meaningful, purposeful activity where is probably going to lessen that, but it just doesn't do. It just seems everything's just thrown in a box, and everyone's like running around scratching their heads wondering why it's not working.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm reading the right book at the moment, Goodbye to All That. It's about the First World War.
Right.
And it literally is lions being commanded by lambs, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what you're getting. Like politicians going, I think it should be this, I think it should be this, but there's no money to do anything. And if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, crazy.
Putting drug addicts in with drug dealers, for me, doesn't make sense.
The best years are well behind the prison service, unfortunately, and that's what they need to get back.
You've got to invest. If you keep cutting, it's going to bleed to death, isn't it?
I want you to find hope and lock onto hope and change your life, change your life and not go back to prison and not live a life of crime.
had it not been for a prison officer who was dedicated to his job that helped me turn my life around, then I probably, like, who knows where I could be today.